Okay, so welcome to the second SaaStock Google Hangout. I'm Alex Theuma, your host, organizer of SaaStock, and founder of SaaScribe as well. And you'll see that I'm joined here. Well, hopefully many people will recognise the face, but actually I won't do the intro. I'll leave it to you. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey, I'm Peter, one of the co-founders and CEO at Segment, and we're a data infrastructure company here in San Francisco.
Okay, awesome. So you're in San Francisco right now, Peter, yeah?
That's right, yeah.
Cool, good stuff, good stuff. And so Segment, I live in a SaaS bubble. I'm organising a big SaaS conference, so I kind of pretty much know you know what you guys do, or you'd hope. Otherwise, it would be a strange booking to have you come over to Dublin. Tell me and tell the audience actually more, about Segment. What it is today, because I understand actually what it is today is not what you set out for the company to be, right? You had a couple of kind of different variations or pivots, sort of even, and it sort of came about through accidentally solving a real problem, right? So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, that's right. I can tell a longer discovery story, but the way it started is we were working on a different product, and we basically realized like, hey, we want to install some analytics tools. We want to install Google Analytics, Kissmetrics, and Mixpanel. And the problem was it was actually quite, it was annoying. You had to go read each of their docs. They each collected the same data, but in slightly different ways. And so we thought, this is a little weird. Like, it's the same data, so why don't we just build an abstraction over it? And so we wrote this little library called Analytics.js that basically you could record user behavior, like people signing up or viewing a page or whatever. And then the library would automatically translate that and fan it out to some of these downstream analytics services. So anyways, we're just sort of solving our own problem. Eventually we open sourced it and put it on Hacker News, and it really got a bunch of attention on Hacker News, got a couple thousand signups when we launched it in December 2012. And the problem that we really wanted to solve was just implementing all of these different SaaS tools that do interesting things with your data is a total pain. And so we just have one library that you drop into your website or your mobile app. And then we handle all the translation and streaming to downstream services, not just analytics, but also email marketing and advertising conversion and attribution tools and visitor recording and help desks and CRMs and so on and so forth. And then recently we expanded the product to not just suck in data from websites and mobile apps, but also from payment systems and help desks and CRMs. So pulling in a much more complete picture of the customer.
Okay, awesome.
You can think about us as sort of like the piping system that gets data from one place to another.
Okay, very good, very good. And how big is how big is Segment now? Like how many people do you employ in the company? I don't know whether it's a metric of how big you are, but how much have you raised? Can you give us a sort of indication of that? Be interesting to know.
Yeah, for sure. So when we launched the open source library in December 2012, we were just four co-founders. Mm-hmm. And over the last 3.5 years, we've grown to I think about 85 people now.
Okay, wow.
And we raised 3 rounds of financing. So 2 million and then 15 and then 27. So I think that adds up to about 44.
Okay, so it's a serious SaaS company then, yeah. by those metrics, by 85 people and the amount of money that you've raised, yeah.
Still just getting started, but yeah.
Yeah, cool, good stuff. So I think I mentioned to you today the theme. Let's talk a little bit about SaaS Business Intelligence. So I think it's a good fit for you guys, and I want to talk a little bit about how SaaS startups can use data. To drive their company's growth, and then like sort of towards the end or middle to end, talk a little bit about what your opinions are on what it takes to build, category leading businesses, SaaS businesses, and then we can kind of have a few sort of fluffier questions as we wrap up. So, sound good to you?
Sounds great.
All right, good stuff. So, first question is really, can you provide, us, and the audience some use cases as to how Segment has used data to, drive your growth and, certainly in the early days?
Yeah, I think I have one example from the very early days. So about 3 months after launching, We put it up on Hacker News, and then we announced some of our very early funding on TechCrunch, and then you basically get this big spike, and then you fall into the valley of death where like no one pays any attention to your thing anymore. And so the question is like, how do you actually drive sort of like sustainable traffic after that peak? And so our solution was like, hey, people seem really confused about what analytics is, so let's just start writing about how to do analytics better. That's not exactly the problem what we solve, but it's adjacent, and so we'll just help people with that problem. And so we started something called Analytics Academy, and we started writing these articles like, here's how to think about analytics, here's how to think about live chat, here's how to do, sort of, we realized we were deep in the space and that we could be helpful. So we started writing this content. And what we saw was that these articles actually got very little traction. They didn't get very many viewers. They didn't get very many upvotes on Hacker News. So our early articles like really didn't do very well. And so the sort of key data insight was that the funnel was broken, right? That like the content just wasn't attracting people. And so what I think a lot of people do or should do with analytics is use analysis and funnels as a way to discover where something is broken. But then you have to switch out of in order to actually figure out how to fix it, you have to switch out of that quantitative analysis into more of a qualitative analysis. So we identified, okay, these articles are not working quantitatively. So then we went and got a bunch of qualitative feedback. And what we discovered is that people didn't find the articles that helpful. And so we got some really specific feedback about how we could make them more actionable, that we should focus the articles on like a few key takeaways that small businesses, SaaS businesses could really use. Mm-hmm. And then we went back, and so we had the quantitative insight, then the qualitative feedback, and then we went back and wrote a series of like 4 or 5 new articles that actually implemented those changes. And the numerical difference was crazy. I think about like 6 or 7x as much traffic out of the articles going forward, and it sort of established Analytics Academy as something that I think tens of thousands of people subscribe to.
Okay, awesome. Great use case there, and I think very sort of applicable to founders that are probably watching this this hangout. Now, Segment is a SaaS company. SaaS companies love using other SaaS tools, and many of these SaaS tools can actually kind of help sort of drive the growth of the business, and especially because they're very powerful sort of pieces of software that provide lots of business intelligence, and with the SaaS model they actually come at normally quite a good price point on a monthly basis, right? So I'd like to know what is in Segment SaaS Toolkit, and what is kind of helping power you to make decisions for the business, and helping therefore drive the business at Segment.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the ones that we really like on our engineering team is Datadog. Mm-hmm. We use them obviously for all of our sort of monitoring, and I think they power a good part of our status page and stuff like that. And they've been a sort of a delight to work with. On the analytics side, we use Amplitude, which is like a mobile analytics tool, and Mode, which is like a BI tool. So it's a way to write SQL queries based on top of a Redshift database or SQL database and build sort of dashboards. So we use that really heavily for our top level company reporting. And then we have a Redshift database that has all of our data in it. We also do a lot of data enrichment. So all the data that we're collecting about how customers are using the product, we enrich it with data from Datanyze and Clearbit. So 2 services that can sort of enrich who people are and so forth. And then there's actually New Relic is one of our customers, and the way that they talk about it about using Segment on their marketing team, I think is sort of how we think about it too. New Relic calls Segment like the Iron Man reactor core of how their marketing team functions, and that's sort of how we think about Segment for ourselves as well. So Segment ends up powering Customer IO and Amplitude and Mode and Datanyze and Clearbit. All these things sort of like connect through our own product. So we obviously dog food Segment itself like crazy.
Do you know how many SaaS tools you actually use? Have you got a list of that, or have you lost count?
That's a good question. It's a lot. Just in the data space, the sorts of things that you would connect into Segment, I think is probably like 20
right.
or more. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a SaaS business, but I have so many SaaS tools, and I just no idea how many I've got now. So I know there are SaaS tools for tracking how many SaaS tools that you actually use. So maybe I need
Yeah.
to do that, and maybe cut back on some of them that I just don't use at all anymore. But
Metrics is another really great one, just for tracking basic revenue coming out of Stripe.
Yep, absolutely. So do you think that data-driven companies? It seems there is a lot of content out there, a lot of talk about data-driven companies. Will they be the winners? Or can you run a successful SaaS company just using things like your gut and your common sense?
You're setting me up to be angry. I think gut and common sense. I mean, gut and common sense is basically like making sort of a wild ass guess, right? Like
Yeah,
about the right
look,
direction, and you might be sort of right. It's sort of like closing your eyes and basically running like as far and as fast as possible in one direction, and it's just like why wouldn't you open your eyes? And it just feels like you're very unlikely to get a lot of things right. There was the recent annual letter from Jeff Bezos to the Amazon shareholders. I thought was really interesting. He introduced this concept of like type 1 and type 2 decisions. I forget which one is which, but one of them is a decision that you can easily reverse, and the other is a decision that you can't easily reverse. And if you can easily reverse it, maybe it's okay to just go gut and common sense and see if it works. But if it's a decision that you can't easily reverse, that you can't easily roll back, I'm not sure why you wouldn't put in sort of the effort to make a data informed decision.
Okay, no, that makes a ton of sense. And actually, I've not seen that Jeff Bezos letter, but that's quite a nice description to answer that question. And I'll need to check out that letter as well.
The cool thing he talks about is as companies get bigger, they actually have a tendency. If startups tend to just always make the gut decision, bigger companies tend to make decisions too much based on data,
right,
or too much based on agreement, when in fact they should just choose one and reverse it later.
Yeah.
He has the opposite perspective on it.
Okay. Now, SaaStock, this is the conference that I'm organising in Dublin in September, and the theme of the SaaStock sort of this year is what it takes to build a category leading sort of SaaS business. We want the delegates to come and sort of learn from not only the speakers but basically everybody that's kind of in attendance about what it takes to build category leading SaaS businesses, right? And now, so what is it in your opinion that it takes? What are the key ingredients according to Peter Reinhardt?
Yeah, well, I think Segment is sort of an early leader in the space, but I'm not sure I'm totally qualified to answer this question. But I'll give you my thoughts. I think the absolute requirement is probably to get product right, and that maybe sounds a little trite, but I don't think in sort of the way that people are buying SaaS products today that there's any way to get around having a bad product with marketing or sales. Or you maybe used to get away with that with like selling on-prem stuff that people couldn't try before they buy, but that's just not how things work anymore. So I think you really have to get product right. And then after that, I think there's actually a surprising level of rigor required to run a growing B2B SaaS company. And I'm not sure that that's widely appreciated, and it's certainly not something that I appreciated earlier on. But as we're growing, starting to see the value in just being more rigorous about a bunch of different things. One example of that is funnel measurement. I think a lot of companies aren't that rigorous about measuring the funnel from sign up all the way through to paid, retention, all that stuff. We watch it like a hawk. And so that's one that we actually got right. Another one is goal setting. Especially as the organization grows beyond like 20 people, it's really, really hard to make sure that everyone is aligned. And it took us 3 years to get this to a good spot. So maybe there's opportunity to screw it up, but and still be okay. But beyond 20 people, it gets really, really hard. So we have a really clear goal setting process now. I guess another one is like market segmentation and go to market. I think I understood roadmaps and I understood like how to talk about a vision and a few other things like that. But I think like go to market is not really a concept that I understood actually until like a few months ago.
Okay.
So yeah, Crossing the Chasm is a really good book there. But yeah, I don't know. There's this level of rigor about actually approaching how to build the business that I think is not super appreciated. Like financial modeling and really aggressively following up on things from one-on-ones and meetings.
Okay, no, really good insights there. I mean, do you think, just adding something else, do you think that you can build a category-leading B2B SaaS business without taking, VC investment? Are there many, bootstrap category leaders out there? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I feel like that's a bit. I think it depends a lot on the specific, actually pricing, packaging, and market you're going after. So the question is basically, can your customers sustain your growth at the pace needed, right? And I feel like that's much more likely if you're collecting annual upfront payments, because that's fantastic for cash flow. So if you're in a business where the default is that, or you're in a market where the default is that you're going to be able to collect annual upfront payments, then the odds of you not having to raise venture capital or some sort of capital and still being able to grow quickly are much higher. I feel like that's like a little bit more of it probably depends. It's basically a question of cash flow, right? And I mean, you have to have cash flow somehow. So if it's not coming from VCs, then I hope your customers have to fund it. Yeah,
no, definitely. Now, you're just coming into, I guess, the final three questions now. Moving away from, I guess, some of the data sort of stuff, but your time as CEO of Segment, what have been the biggest lessons that you've learnt, over the last sort of few years?
I think the thing that I thought I knew early on, but I just have a deeper and deeper appreciation for every day, is that the team matters far, far more than everything else. And my job now, we're approaching 100 people. So my job now, more than anything else, is just empowering the team, like in service of the team. So how can I help them focus on the right goals? How can I sort of support great work and push where it's lacking? How can we set things up so that the business succeeds when the people in the business succeed? And then just help people succeed. It's very different, and I think the biggest learning for me has just been like how important the team itself is. Okay.
Aside from Segment, who are the most exciting SaaS companies in your opinion, and why?
That's a good question. I actually have maybe like a bit broader ranging interests than than just pure software. I think have you ever tried to do circuit board design?
No, never.
It's like a total pain. It's like very archaic. There's a new company in the last batch of YC that I think is pretty interesting called Snap EDA.
Okay.
They basically help with circuit board design. Anyway, there's some ones that are maybe a bit closer to home. Like, have you used Greenhouse?
No, I know Greenhouse. There's the kind of application tracking software or recruitment software. But yeah, I think a lot of SaaS companies are using that, right?
Yeah, not the sexiest thing, but whoever is in charge of user experience there, like they somehow have completely exactly matched the business workflow for recruiting. It's very impressive. There's not very many companies, I think, that are like that good at matching a like application workflow to like what you actually want to accomplish. So I find that pretty exciting.
Okay.
Although maybe not the sexiest thing in the world.
Okay. Yeah. Although I have to say, Workable are a gold sponsor of SaaStock, so we'll give those guys a little shout out there as well. I'm sure they've got a very good UI. I've not seen it though myself.
There's another company you may be familiar with, Clearbit.
Yeah.
Traditionally, there's a lot of poor tools in that category.
Yeah.
but their products and support are just fantastic. So high hopes for them as well.
All right, awesome. And final question. So in September 22nd, you're coming over to Dublin. You're doing a keynote talk at the inaugural SaaStock conference. So really super excited about that. What can we expect from your talk at SaaStock?
Yeah, there's a couple of possibilities, but the most likely, I think, is talking about how the actual vast majority of SaaS startups fail. And I think specifically they fail at the earliest stage, which is they never get product market fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we failed twice at this before we got something to work. But interestingly, I think founders keep making the same mistake again and again, despite being warned about it, which is really interesting. So I'm currently planning to talk about that and how, as founders, we may reduce that failure mode.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think that sounds really interesting. Really looking forward to hearing that, seeing that live in Dublin on the 22nd. And so on that note, just want to thanks for your time today, Peter.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to publishing this hangout on the SaaStock blog, and also look forward to seeing you in Dublin on the 22nd of September at SaaStock.
Awesome. See you then.
Cool. Cheers. See you then.